My name's Jo Flanagan. I'm CEO of Women's Health Tasmania, and I'm sitting here talking to Jen, one of my colleagues, who is here both in a capacity as a health worker and as a member of the LGBTI community.
Hi Jo.
Hi Jen. Thank you so much for doing this.
That's a pleasure.
It's a trip out in the Prius, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So recently you were on a panel with a group of bi women, was it, for Biodiversity Day, or bi people?
By people, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was that fun?
It was really informative. Ruby Grant talked about her research. There was a gentleman there whose name escapes me, and he was a lovely man, talking about some research as well that's been done around health and mental health for the bi community. So it was really informative. Some of it was a little depressing.
Was it?
Yeah, because the health outcomes for bi people aren't always great. And also, I guess for me, when I spoke, I got a little bit emotional. I'd had something interesting happen the day before. Well, actually, no, it was that day, kind of around bivisibility, but anyway, so it was actually quite an emotional day. But the really great thing was actually being in a room with other people who identify as bi or pansexual, who actually get you. And when all of us spoke, to have people that are really understanding, it's their experience, is a really supportive environment to be in.
Do you think bi people are more invisible than, say, same-sex attracted people?
Absolutely, because we're often identified by our partner. So if people see you in a relationship, particularly a long-term relationship with a woman, then they assume that you're a lesbian. If you're in a long-term relationship with a man, then of course they see you as straight. And I mean, while some bi folk are polyamorous, most aren't. So how do people know, I guess? They just kind of put you in a box depending on who your partner is.
Yeah. Is it important that people know?
That people know that you're bi? For some people, absolutely. For me, it is. Because it's not just about, I guess, the person I'm in a relationship with. My bisexuality is kind of a bit of a political statement as well. It's about me occupying that space in between, so that I guess people are aware that everything's not straight or gay and everything's not black or white, that there's these areas in between, the shades of grey, or I like to call it the shades of purple. Because the bisexual flag is actually a pink triangle and a blue triangle overlapping, and that space where they overlap is purple or violet. So,
and that's where bi exists.
Yep.
Yeah. Why is it that bi people have worse health outcomes?
Well, I think it's because, there's probably a whole lot of reasons, but I think it is because they are invisible, because people don't know they exist, or if they do, there's a lot of pressure on you from both the straight community and the gay community to pick a team, because everyone wants, a lot of people want things in neat boxes, so there's this kind of pressure to pick a side. And sadly, for bi folk, a lot of that pressure will often come from the queer community, so from gays and lesbians. They really want you to kind of pick a team and stick to it. There's that. I think there's also, because you don't fit neatly into a box and you're feeling that pressure from society, and it's a really hard coming out process. For some bi people, they might think at first maybe I am gay or lesbian, then when they realise they're not fitting neatly into society's little boxes, can cause a lot of, I guess, mental anguish, confused for yourself as well, I guess, particularly if you don't know that it is possible to be bi. For some people it's not until they meet other bi folk that they actually realise, hey, it's okay, this is who I am, there are other people like me, I'm not alone.
How do you find other bi folk?
Well, hopefully you'd be able to find them in the queer community, but not always. When I first came out as bi down here in Tassie, I think initially I only knew of one other person that was bi, and it wasn't until I went to the International Bisexuality Conference in Sydney that I kind of met a whole lot of other bi folk, which was an amazing experience. It was really wonderful, people from all around the world, bi activists. Fritz Klein, who wrote The Bisexual Option, he is a doctor researcher from the US and done a lot of research and kind of expanded Fritz Klein's, not Fritz Klein, because that's who I'm talking about. What was his name? Kinsey's, Kinsey's scale of sexuality.
Report, yeah.
He actually developed a grid of sexuality, Fritz Klein, and talked about attraction on all sorts of levels, so emotionally, politically, sexual, so just pure sexual attraction, and there were a few other things, and made up this kind of grid. And really, in reality, I think a lot more people fit in that grey area than they do on either end. But that societal pressure to pick the team means that, most people are either on one end or the other. But I think a lot of us would probably find that on some level, whether it's emotional attraction or physical attraction, are probably in that grey area, that purple area.
How far are we away from a day when people will, know their sexuality quite young and feel okay about saying it? And
I hope it's soon, but the political climate and how we seem to be getting more and more conservative, it feels like it could even go a bit backwards, really, particularly when you've got leaders such as we do at the moment, and people like Israel Folau coming out saying pretty horrendous things. You kind of wonder whether things might go backwards before we move forwards again.
Tell me about when you went to their conference. What was it like? It must have been amazing.
Oh, it was awesome. And it just being in the room with people that get you, you didn't have to explain. Everyone was the same, and we didn't all have the same experiences, but very similar experiences. And I learnt a lot about what people were doing overseas with regards to bi-activism and supporting each other. There was a wonderful older woman called Bobby Keppel from the US who was very active around elders in the bi community and in the queer community in general.
So tell me about bi-activism. What kind of things are bi-activists advocating for mostly?
Well, sadly then and still now, for recognition in the queer community a lot of the time, for queer organisations to actually really include us, not just put the B in, include the B in the whole LGBTIQ+, but actually really thinking about bi issues in particular. So that was a big part of it. Just being visible was huge as well. So just, I guess, raising awareness that we're actually here.
And Jen, you don't have to answer this question, but personal stories are interesting. How did you realise? What happened that made you realise this is me?
Oh, okay. So I was in relationships, just with men until my late 20s. And then when my marriage ended, I fell in love with a woman for the first time. And when I fell in love with her, and she was identified as lesbian, that's when I realised that I was also attracted to women. And then, of course, I guess for somebody who's bi and, kind of grown up in that world where everybody was straight, you do look at women, but you think you're only looking at women like other women do, admiring them, And with hindsight, you go, actually, I was probably attracted to women as well all along. I just hadn't fallen in love with one. So it really wasn't until I had that first relationship. And then, of course, because she was a lesbian, she's like, well, now you're a lesbian. And I'm thinking, hang on, but that kind of negates all of those relationships that I had with men. I'm not there weren't thousands of them, I shouldn't say all those, but it negates all those happy relationships that I had with men that I really enjoyed. And so I thought, well, actually, no, I'm not a lesbian. Yes, I'm in love with you, I'm having a relationship with you, but I'm not a lesbian. And luckily for me, I was at TAFE doing a youth work diploma at the time, and researching lots of things, including the LGBTIQ community, and was reading and found stuff about bisexuality, even did a few assignments around the topic, so I guess I kind of felt quite empowered.
Did you have mentors?
Mentors in the bi community? No.
Do you think that would have made a difference?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I found myself being a mentor pretty quick. Working it out had just kind of got off the ground, and they had their befriend program, and I was working in the same building as Working It Out, and I was approached by the worker there to be a befriender. So very quickly I found myself providing support for bi folk that were coming out.
Okay. And you talked about the poor health outcomes for bi women. Can you describe what the biggest issues are?
I'd have to say probably mental health, substance abuse, so drugs and alcohol, and smoking, I think, are the big ones for bi women. And also, another thing that a lot of bi women face too is physical, family violence. So, because if they're in a relationship, well, it can go either way. I mean, obviously, family violence happens in same-sex relationships as well. So I can't think of the research that I read, but they actually found that bi women experience family violence, because particularly if they're not out publicly and the partner can use that against them, or even if they are out, the partner being violent because they are same-sex attracted, and as well as opposite, and jealousy and all sorts of things. So, and I think whenever you're different, it kind of makes you more vulnerable. Whenever you don't fit into a particular box, I think you're more vulnerable.
You're seeing a rising kind of rate of psychological distress among women, particularly in Tasmania at the moment anyway, so
yep.
Yeah, I can, if you're within that group and more vulnerable, I can see that would be very hard. Yeah.
Yep.
So what is it that you like about being bi?
I've always, and my mum always used to talk to me about seeing things from different points of view, and knowing that nothing is ever black or white, right or wrong. And I think being bisexual and occupying that space in between, for me anyway, it has always allowed me to see things from different perspectives, because I'm not on one side or the other, so I feel like I'm more open to other possibilities, and I think that's a really wonderful thing, because when you do come to, I guess, settle on a particular point of view, you're kind of taking in all those other viewpoints, and I feel like it's a more whole perspective, but also you can empathise with others, because you can kind of step in to their shoes to see things from other perspectives. So I think that's a real positive, absolutely.
And do you often get calls at work for women asking to talk about these kinds of issues?
Not so much from bi women over the years, but I have had calls from women who are in relationships with men who are having sex with men. So that's been the kind of contact that that I've had at work. I have had I have had one bi woman that used to come in a bit and talk about her struggle with her bisexuality, because she also was religious, and it was difficult for her to be out, and particularly in her church she couldn't. So that was one particular woman. But yeah, the other contact has been from women whose partners are having sex with men, which is a whole another thing. There's actually a service in New South Wales, the Leichhardt Women's Health Service run a service called Women Partners of Bisexual Men, and we actually have a book in the library with stories from women who found out that their husbands or partners were also same-sex attracted.
So Jen, one of the things we've been curious about is people's experiences of health services.
Yep.
How have you found it going to health services?
It kind of depends, really. I think when I first came out, I had a GP. He was lovely, but he made the assumption that I was a lesbian, and was surprised once when I asked for a pap smear, because he said lesbians don't need pap smears, which is completely incorrect anyway, because all women need pap smears. And of course I also informed him that I was bisexual. But then later on, when I was in a relationship with a man and I went to him for the pill, again there was kind of this surprise and, oh, you want the guy on the pill, what do you know? Which, it's kind of tiring having to educate GPs, and luckily for me I'm pretty strong and out and proud, so it was okay. But then asking inappropriate questions, like he actually asked me if I slept with a woman, would it be cheating on my male partner?
Right, that's possibly taking your community education role a bit further than is appropriate.
Absolutely, yes. It is indeed. But I guess the other thing too is, service providers just assuming, not saying, they often say your husband, or, they just assume that you've got a male partner. So I guess the best thing that any service can do is to just use really gender neutral language. If they're not sure, to ask, is your partner male or female? Or maybe even just say what is the gender of your partner, because somebody might not identify as male or female, they might be genderqueer. So just asking those questions, and not being frightened to ask, I guess, about how you have sex, because even if you were in a relationship, for instance, with a transgender woman, so she's identifying as a woman but she might be pre-op, you might still be having intercourse as a man and a woman would. So just not being frightened, I guess, to ask those questions about how you're having sex and are you having safe sex, and making sure that all of those appropriate tests and things are done. Yes.
Great, thanks.